We caught up with Cathy after her presentation to learn more about the Harris daughters and, of course, about Sarah and what happened when she married Robert.
No, I think that history is really about people, and while the wars and the explorers and where they went are important, at least their roots, I think it's really the interaction between the individuals and those events which makes the whole process come alive. Because if you're just studying that there was a war and X number of people were involved and the boundaries of a certain country changed, it doesn't give you a great emotional connection. But if you read about the people, and particularly if you can find what they actually said, you're much closer to understanding the events of the past. And to me, that's what it's all about, is understanding what went on, and hopefully, if it was a mistake, we won't do it again. But also just the individuals themselves are always very interesting, I find. And, you know, if you can actually hear the voice of the person involved through his or her writings, it's fascinating. And this is why the diaries, the Harris diaries themselves, which are very simple, are most intriguing. You can read the diaries of much more important people, and you get even closer to the source of where history is made. You know, reading Queen Victoria's diaries is even more intriguing than the Harris ones. But these are pretty good, and they tell us a lot, and they tell us a lot about the social conditions of the time, quite by accident. Just, you know, got a letter from Sarah, and she's so unhappy about the fact that her husband hasn't got a promotion, and we're broke, and what are we going to do next, and how can I afford to send the children to the right schools, this sort of thing. You get a very great appreciation and sympathy for the people who were living through a time when the world was changing, and being a member of the British Army and a member of the upper classes didn't necessarily mean that you had a job for life at all. Suddenly you had to reinvent yourself, and I don't think Sarah's husband was able to do so. Some of the others could. Well, I think that Sarah's marriage to Robert, I don't think it was an unqualified success at all. He was definitely a difficult man. Certainly the diary references to him, from the perspective of the Harrises themselves, he had no charm. I would say no charm at all. And his children sound to have been quite nice kids from what you read. You wonder how much influence he had on their lives. He certainly moved them around a bit, trying to find a place where it was cheaper to live. There's some interesting little letters up in the archives from some of the grandchildren writing back to their unknown grandmother at Eldon House, written from Belgium, where they went because living was cheaper, written in French. And I always wondered whether Amelia could read them, whether her French was up to it. I don't think she would have ever studied French, but her children did, and obviously her grandchild did as well. But no, Robert Dalzell was, I think, a complicated man, and his inability to get along with his in-laws is really very sad, because it really made it hard for Sarah when she was back visiting with her husband here. They didn't have a happy time because she was always having to explain Robert to her family and sort of what made him the way he was, and just didn't go over very well. I think everybody was relieved when they left. Probably Sarah most of all.
And she had some illnesses too, didn't she?
Well, she did, but we're never sure what they are. They're very, I don't think coy is quite the word, but they don't go into this very much as to what was wrong with people. You know, occasionally they will mention that somebody had a miscarriage or somebody lost their baby or what have you, but they don't seem to go into any particular description. And sometimes they say somebody was so ill. Turns out they had a cold, you know, because 2 pages later, this person is recovered and is going to party. So obviously the serious illness was very temporarily serious.
Do you think there was a lot of concern over Sarah marrying first before the other daughters? As you know,
she was the eldest.
Yeah.
She was the eldest, and I always felt they were probably happy to start getting them out of the nest, because really money was tight here at Eldon House. Of course, it became even worse after John Harris died, and his half pay went with him, and his job at as the treasurer went. But by this point, gradually, the boys were starting to earn money as lawyers, though not much for a while. But I think that getting the girls established was really of prime importance. And here was Robert. He was an older man. He had a good job in the army. Everything's going to be wonderful.
And possibly a title, too.
Possibly a title, though I think Amelia was pretty sure. She does make some reference at one point in one of her entries that one of my grandsons will get the title. But I love Millie's later years when she goes to visit, well, when she's in London in either 93 or 96, and she visits Carnwath House and is saying, you know, it's looking a bit better than it did. The gardens have improved. But I do wish that Robert, and that was her cousin, you see, her second cousin, I guess would be, I wish he'd get a haircut. she's quite judgmental about the whole thing. But she sort of likes him. He's quite a lot older than she is, but she's not particularly impressed by this guy with the title. He's just another cousin.
And when Millie visited Sarah, well, she was going to school, and I think that was in the early 1880s.
That was 82 to 84, yeah.
Was that when Sarah was living at the house in Torquay?
Yeah, Kilmar's, yeah. Which we don't have a picture of. That's why I used this other picture that we did have of a similar style of house. Yeah, Robert had died a couple of years before, and there's have been references at a later date to Sarah having to give up the house. And whether that was financial problems or health problems, we don't know. But certainly while Millie was at school, Millie's family paid. And there's a bit in the diaries, I guess in Lucy's diary, Millie's mother's diary, indicating that she didn't think much of this. You know, they had to pay for the extra maid, they had to pay for everything, all the expenses, and it seems quite obvious that Sarah just did not have the money.
And really, by having those girls go there.
Oh, that was a good source of income, sure. And I'm sure the Labats paid quite well as well. So Sarah, at least Millie was there for 2 years, and went as a day girl to this quite classy school. And then the Labatt girls lived with Sarah for 1 year, and then I went into residence at the school, because there was a boarding component. But Millie made friends there that she kept forever, well, at least as long as I read her diaries, and she visits them frequently. Well, in 1896, when she's back over, she has a great time visiting the old friends and going to see the old school and going to see where they used to walk and how the town has changed and all this sort of thing. So she was disappointed that the headmistress was on holiday when she went there and she couldn't go and talk to her again. But it was, you know, a very normal sort of thing of going back. But she never once mentions going back to Aunt Sarah's house, and Aunt Sarah was not there then. Aunt Sarah was living with the daughter who had married Lancelot Rolleston, a wonderful name, and had a big house just outside of Nottingham, and that's where Sarah died.